So we're here today to talk about the concept of theory of action, both what it is and why you would have one and how do you go about making one. So we're going to do a little hands-on activity, and I will model that and then invite you to do the same in your own practice. But first, let's talk about what is a theory of action. It's kind of a fancy way of saying if we do A or B, we expect X, Y, or Z to happen. So it's a fancy way of saying around the if, this is what we're going to try to do. And around the then, here's what we expect to happen as a result. Now, surprisingly, in education, we don't often articulate that. We'll say, well, of course, everybody assumes what we're trying to do is increase student achievement, and whatever we're proposing is the thing on the if. But it's actually really important to try to make that explicit. And there are a number of reasons about that. One is, if we say it out loud and in writing, then we can look at it and say, does this make sense before we invest a lot in making this happen? Do we really think if we do on what's happening on the if side, we're going to get what we want on the then side? Or are there some assumptions in there that we need to unpack? Or are there some other things we might need to do in order to really get that result that we want? It also makes it clear to everyone, why would we do this? People, okay, so we're trying to get increased student achievement, close an achievement gap, prepare kids for success. Oh, that's why we're doing this new initiative that's taking up my time and I don't have time for it, right? So making it really clear to people why we're doing it. So a theory of action statement is basically an if-then statement. It should be testable later on. It should be kind of a guidepost so we can come back to it and say, did that work the way we expected, or did we leave something out? Oh, we might need to revise our theory of action in order to really get the results we want. So I'm going to demonstrate with a theory of action that's quite popular in school districts these days, which is if we use formative assessments, then we will get increased student achievement. So let's just start with that. So I've got up here my if and my then, and I'm going to put up, using these wonderful giant sticky notes, if we do formative assessments, then we'll get increased student achievement. Now, often in school districts, this might be as far as we get. But the thing is, we all know, especially if you've tried this, that it doesn't magically happen that if you do formative assessments, then you get the increased student achievement. There's a lot of other things that have to happen in between those to make that work. So part of the exercise of a theory of action is trying to articulate, well, what does need to happen between here and here in order to get the results? So let's just think about that together. So if we do formative assessments, then we'll get increased student achievement. Well, it might be that the people who are doing the formative assessments are going to have to do something with their instruction in order to get the increased student achievement. So, all right, so we're going to have improved instruction, some adjustments to instruction, improved instruction coming out of these assessments to get to the student achievement. Okay, so let's put that up. So I'll just move this over a little bit. Get the then. I'm going to say, all right. Now I forgot my little pink arrow here for them, but we can put that up later. Okay, so if we do formative assessments, then teachers will adjust their instruction and we'll get increased student achievement. Great, except that, of course, it's not that easy either. What has to happen in order for us to get from assessments to adjusting instruction? Well, teachers might get some ideas about what the problem is and have no idea what to do about it. So maybe we need to offer some professional development, some support to say, hey, let's improve your knowledge and skill around whatever this area that students are struggling with, and then you'll be able to adjust your instruction. Okay, so we need some professional development for teachers. If we do that, and now I'm going to have to go move my little if out a little bit. And this, by the way, is exactly how designing a theory of action works, which is that it's iterative. And whenever I ask somebody, what's your theory of action, they sometimes hesitate to tell me because they say, well, it's a work in progress. Well, all theories of action are works in progress. That's the point. It's a theory, and you're trying to test it and revise it. So here we go. All right, if we do the formative assessments and we offer teachers some support around what to do about it, then they'll adjust their instruction and we'll get increased student achievement. Now notice already, if we just went ahead and tried our formative assessments, offered some professional development, we could test this and we could say, well, did that actually work? Did it work that teachers went from the assessments, they got the PD, they adjusted their instruction, boom? Well, not usually. Not in my experience does it work quite that simply. Most of the teachers I would know say, you know what? We can do assessments out the wazoo, but if they're not tied to the curriculum that I've taught, they're useless to me. And if they're not tied to the standards that what the achievement is being measured on, also useless. So most of the teachers I know would say, okay, those formative assessments, they better be connected with the standards and curriculum, or none of this is going to make sense. And then most of the administrators I know say, you know what, that support's great, but if we don't also hold people accountable for responding, people with the best of intentions may not respond. And ideally, we want to hold each other accountable. We don't want that being a principal holding a teacher accountable. We want to build a climate where teachers hold each other accountable. All right, so our model's looking a little more robust here. It's also looking quite rational right now. And we all know that if a big piece of our theory is that people are going to change what they're doing every day, some things might have to happen around that. So we say, you know what are some of the softer things that we often don't pay attention to when we're articulating fancy theories? And one of them is trust. The adults in here are going to have to trust each other and really get to work together so that they can help each other. So we're going to put trust up as a habit of heart and mind that we're going to need. And we'll put it right there next to adjusting instruction, because if I'm going to adjust my instruction, I'm really going to need to trust my colleagues, and this is about students and about my practice and not a reflection of me personally. Another habit of mind and heart that we're going to be developing through this process is really using evidence to inform what we do in the classroom. So through this process, we're going to have to be developing that. And if we don't get that in place, then we're really not going to, over time, actually get down here. If I look back at trust, I say, well, how do we get trust? How are people actually going to be sitting around with formative assessment results and really get to the heart of what they need to do? And I say, well, one of the things that could help us build trust is to have some protocols, so that when we're together, we get focused on the evidence, we get focused on the students, and we don't get caught up in, oh, this is about whether I'm good or bad, effective or not effective. It's about, okay, so are students learning what we want them to? So we're going to need some protocols to help us do that. It's also true that there may be some resources we need to make this work. So as I'm looking at this model, I'm thinking, you know, this sounds great, but if we don't have time for people to meet and talk about the results of the assessments, it's going to be left to them individually, and some will be able to make the time and some won't. And so we're going to have to build that formally in. Let's see if I can get this to stick. We're going to have to build that formally into the structure of the day so that the teachers can get together and meet and talk about what the implications of the assessments are. The other thing we're going to need is some kind of technology support so that the teachers aren't using their time to do every single bit of assessment, unless we think that's really critical here to our model. Maybe some of them, they're doing all of the assessment, but maybe some things we can ship off and get back. Now again, most of the teachers I know say, this is all great and everything, but often the results come back to me 6 weeks after I taught whatever it was, or even a week after I taught whatever it was, and by then I've moved on. So it's really hard for me to adjust my instruction unless I get a rapid response. We do the assessment, I get the results back. Whether it's you built in time for me to do the results, or whether they go off on a computer and they come right back to me in a form I can use. Otherwise, I'm not really going to be able to adjust my instruction in real time for kids. All right, so this is getting a little fuller. I think that I've got some of the elements of what I might need for success here. And now I'm going to pay a little more attention to my results. Often when we do things in education, we are so anxious to do things better for children that we don't spend a lot of time getting really articulate about what do we want to see as an outcome. And especially in the high-pressure external accountability environment that we all swim in right now, we often just stop with, well, of course we want to increase student achievement. But there are other things we might want for children too. In this particular case, the formative assessments are really designed to impact student achievement. But you could also argue that we also want kids to have success in college, work, and life, and we feel like, you know what, if we get this increased student achievement, then we're going to get the success in college, work, and life. We also might want to say, maybe we think that this will help us close achievement gaps. Maybe if we're really looking at formative assessments, we're looking at individuals and groups of students and really trying to think about what they need, that will help us close some of the persistent gaps. But I'm not sure I want to put that up here, because I think that if I wanted to get to that result, there are some other things I might need happening too. So I hope that's going to happen, but I'm not sure that I'm going to put that on my model just yet. The only other thing I'm wondering is whether anybody else needs to be involved here. So I could see we might go test this, we might try this, we put in a new technology infrastructure, we built in common planning time, we used protocols, we got the results back quickly to teachers, we had some ways to both support and hold teachers accountable, as well as principals and district level people for supporting them accountable. We saw some improvements, but maybe not as much as we wanted. So we revisit our theory and we say, so what's missing? Those assessments, they seem really tied to what we're doing. You say, you know what? We've focused this all on teachers. We haven't involved kids. And what about involving students in this process of formative assessment? Instead of having the formative assessments be done to them, maybe they need to be really involved in looking at the assessment results themselves, figuring out not just we're going to have adjustments in instruction, but maybe students need to make some adjustments in how they're learning. So you know what? I'm going to go back and revise my model and say, we might need to involve students and maybe even parents. I'm not sure about that part yet. Maybe we'll start with students, but we'll just kind of note that parents, we might need to get them involved at this formative assessment level. We're not sure what that will look like. And once I've got this colorful map, I could write it up in a sentence. I might not have every single element in the sentence, but I might say something like, if we do formative assessments, provide teachers with the time to meet and the other support they need, including professional development. We hold each other accountable for responding to the formative assessments. We involve students in the process. Then we think we'll see improved student achievement, which will ultimately lead to kids being successful in their post-secondary life of work, college, and career. So that might be the sentence we would generate out of this. And then as we try to implement this strategy, we can go back and say, did it work? Did we need to surface some other underlying assumptions? Do we need to adjust it? Do we need to do something with the assessments themselves? Something with our support and accountability? Something with whom we're involving? Do we need to really change the outcome to really push on that gaps question? And if so, how does that connect to other things we're doing? So it'll be something we'll consistently revise, but this gives us a starting place so that we know, you know what, we think everything up here is essential. If we took one thing off of here, we think it wouldn't work. We wouldn't get the result we want, or at least not as much as we want. But if we do everything that's up here, this is our best guess right now about how we're going to get the result we want. So this is what we're going to try. Everybody will be clear about this is our theory. This is why we're taking this approach, not just because everybody's doing formative assessments. It sounds like a good idea. It's better than the state test. We need something a little more fine-grained. But we actually have a theory about how using those formative assessments will lead to the outcome we want. So that's an example of a theory of action. And I hope that you take out those sticky notes. I find that people really like to use lots of colors, lots of shapes, and get to move them around and get to iterate on it, have a conversation about it, and let people get a little creative rather than trying to just keep writing a statement. So I encourage you to try this and continue to adapt it in your practice. Thank you.